Once betrayed and cast out, he buried his past in silence. But one winter night, destiny collapsed at his doorstep, unconscious and bleeding. In the outskirts of a village that barely remembered his name, a man lived among the cold winds and quieter fields. His name was Aiden, though no one had spoken it in years. They called him the Cursed One, the farmer whose fields bore more sorrow than grain, whose presence turned milk sour and crops dry. He hadn't always been an outcast. Years ago he wore a soldier's crest, marched in royal parades, and believed in honor. But honor had a cost, and he had paid it with blood, betrayal, and exile. Now his world was the creak of old wood, the whisper of wind through brittle stalks, and the rhythm of work no one witnessed. He spoke to no one, laughed at nothing. His only companion was silence, and even that felt heavy sometimes. Yet he never left the land. Something in the soil held him, like a punishment or a vow he couldn't break. Most days were numb. He planted because it was all he knew. He harvested enough to survive, traded what little he had in nearby villages where eyes looked through him instead of at him. Children whispered tales of the haunted man beyond the ridge. Mothers warned their sons not to wander near the broken fence where the cursed farmer lived. But Aiden never corrected them. Let them believe. Let them stay away. The only warmth in his life came from the hearth he rebuilt every winter, stacking firewood with the precision of a craftsman and the desperation of a man fighting the cold creeping into his bones. His hands were cracked, his hair streaked with gray. His eyes, once sharp with dreams, had settled into dull amber, watchful but unwilling. That evening a storm rolled in, heavier than the ones before. The sky cracked open, spilling ice-cold rain across the horizon. Aiden tied his cloak, lowered his lantern, and stepped outside to salvage what he could before the wind claimed it. He didn't expect to see a figure, small, cloaked, and motionless, slumped at the edge of his field. He froze. The rain pounded harder. Was it a trick? A thief? A corpse? Slowly, cautiously, he moved closer. Lightning lit the field for a breathless second, and in that flash he saw blood, soaked into her sleeve, matting her hair. Her hand twitched once before falling limp again. She was alive, barely, and she had collapsed at the doorstep of the man the world had long ago decided was already dead inside. Aiden stared at her, heart thudding like it hadn't in years. His instinct screamed to turn back, to let the storm take her. What did it matter? He owed nothing to anyone. No one had helped him when he'd needed saving. But something in her face, a flicker of defiance frozen in unconscious pain, held him still. He lifted her into his arms. Her skin burned with fever. Her cloak fell open just enough to reveal a flash of deep purple fabric beneath, too fine for any villager. Not a wanderer, not a thief, someone important, someone hunted. By the time he laid her down beside the hearth, her breathing was shallow. He threw another log into the fire, tore linen into bandages, and fed her bread soaked in broth when she stirred. He didn't ask who she was, not yet. He only watched her with eyes that had forgotten what it meant to hope or to fear. He remembered another winter, one where he had knelt in the snow beside a friend bleeding out. That friend had worn the same color, had served the same crown, had whispered his last words into Aiden's ear before dying. And those words still echoed in him like a scar that wouldn't close. Now this woman, draped in royal colors marked by violence, lay in his home. Coincidence was too gentle a word for what this was. She stirred in her sleep, murmuring something he couldn't catch. Her hand reached for something invisible. A dagger. A name. He wasn't sure. The wind howled louder outside, slamming against the wooden door. He stayed by her side, feeding the fire, dampening her fever, and waiting. Not for her to wake, not for answers, but for the storm outside to match the one now rising inside him. At some point in the night she screamed, a sharp, violent sound that made Aiden reach instinctively for the blade under his coat. But she didn't wake. Her lips moved soundlessly, her brow furrowed. She was fighting something even sleep couldn't protect her from. Aiden stood, pacing now. His boots creaked against the wooden floor. He looked at her face, bruised, delicate, proud, and saw pieces of the past stitching themselves into the present. He needed to know who she was. He needed to know why the universe had chosen his doorstep. Before dawn, he stepped outside. The storm had eased to a drizzle. Mist curled over the hills like fingers clawing at the earth. And then, voices. 2 men, on horseback, at the edge of his land, asking questions. One held up a parchment. Even from this distance, Aiden saw the royal seal pressed into the wax. His blood turned cold. At dawn, as the fire dimmed and the storm passed, Aiden stepped outside and found royal soldiers at the edge of his land asking if he'd seen a woman on the run. In a world where no one gave him a second glance, Aiden offers bread to a stranger and unknowingly invites danger into his home. The storm had passed, but its echoes clung to the damp walls of Aiden's cottage. Inside, firelight flickered against the stone, casting long shadows over the woman lying unconscious beneath his only blanket. Her breathing, though faint, had steadied, and the fever burning her skin seemed to relent under his makeshift care. Aiden sat nearby, breaking a stale loaf in half, dipping it in broth, and bringing the softened bread to her lips. She didn't stir. Memories clawed their way back. The last time he'd offered food to a stranger years ago during the war, and how that simple gesture had ended in betrayal. Still, something deeper than habit compelled him now. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was something he refused to name. When she finally opened her eyes, it was sudden, startling, wide, dark, alert. She flinched away from his hand, then clutched the blanket to her chest as if waking from battle. "You're safe," he said quietly. She didn't answer. Her gaze flicked toward the door, the windows, the fire, him. "What's your name?" "Nothing." He poured a ladle of broth and set it beside her on the table. "Eat. Then you can decide if you want to leave." She didn't move. He stepped back, letting her have space, then sat in silence across the room. The fire cracked. The wind moaned through the cracks in the shutters. She eyed the bowl, then slowly reached out. Her hands shook. Bruises wrapped around her wrists like fading shackles. Aiden watched her in silence. There was a grace to her, even in weakness. Her posture, the way she moved, the way she concealed fear behind measured glances. No ordinary traveler held themselves that way. But she said nothing more that night. Not her name. Not where she came from. Not who had hurt her. She stayed by the fire, refusing his cot, curling instead into the floor's edge as if she expected to be cast out at any moment. By morning, her fever had lessened. Aiden left a piece of bread on the table before heading to the field. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't expect her to stay. But when he returned at dusk, she was still there, sweeping the ashes, as if trying to erase her presence. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I won't stay long." Her voice was hoarse but calm. "I didn't ask you to." She glanced at him, then away. "I just need a few days." He nodded once and went to fetch water. No questions, no demands. That night she ate in silence while Aiden sharpened tools. The air between them was heavy with things unsaid. She startled at every sound. Her eyes darted to the window whenever the wind rose. Once she froze mid-bite, listening so intently that Aiden stopped breathing too. "What is it?" he asked. She didn't answer. He set the knife down slowly. "You're hiding from someone." She stared at him. He couldn't tell if she was angry or afraid. "I won't tell," he added. She turned back to her meal, but the tension never left her shoulders. That night, Aiden couldn't sleep. The storm had gone, but something colder lingered in the air. He lay awake, listening to the wind, to the crackle of firewood, and to her whispers. She was dreaming again, or trapped in a memory. Her voice, faint and broken, murmured names he didn't recognize. Orders. "Please, don't let them find me." He opened his eyes, heart pounding. "Not yet. Please, I'm not ready." Eden sat up in the dark, staring at the shape curled on the floor near the fire. Something told him this wasn't a simple fugitive. She carried too much weight in her silence, too much training in her instincts, too much pain behind her eyes. Outside, the wind shifted. A branch snapped. He froze. Then he heard it. Soft, low voices. Close. Too close. Not the wind. Not animals. People. Whispering. Searching. That night, Aiden hears muffled voices just beyond the window. Someone is in the woods calling out a name she never told him. Every answer she avoids deepens the mystery and the danger closing in. The next morning arrived thick with gray skies and unspoken tension. Aiden had barely slept, his ears tuned to every creak in the walls, every gust of wind brushing past the shutters. She hadn't spoken since whispering in her sleep, but her eyes, sharper now, had the look of someone who expected war at every turn. She ate without a word. He didn't ask questions, but both of them were listening to the forest, to footsteps, to fate. Just before noon, the first sign arrived. Hoofbeats. Slow. Deliberate. Then came the knock at the village inn. Then the black cloak brushing past the baker's window. Aiden saw it all from the ridge, standing behind his tool shed. 3 riders, official, too clean for travelers, too bold for merchants. They were asking questions. Have you seen a young woman? About so tall, traveling alone, wounded. The village gave them little. Most shrugged, others shook their heads too quickly. But Aiden knew how these men worked. They wouldn't need much. He returned home with stiff limbs and a racing mind. She was already at the window, eyes fixed, jaw tense. When he stepped inside, she turned. "They're here," she said. Not a question. "I saw." She looked away. "I'll leave by nightfall." "You won't make it," Aiden replied. "The trail's too wet. And they're watching the roads." She said nothing. Her silence was starting to sound like a language. "Get in the cellar," he said finally. She blinked, surprised, maybe even moved. "You don't have to." "I know." He lifted the old trapdoor, dust rising like ghosts, and lit the lantern below. She hesitated only a second before climbing down into the narrow space where he once stored potatoes, tools, memories. "Stay quiet. Don't come out. No matter who knocks." She nodded. He closed the door, replaced the rug, and resumed chopping firewood with the rhythm of a man who had nothing to hide. When the soldiers arrived at his door an hour later, they smiled too much. "Just routine, farmer," the taller one said, stepping onto the porch without invitation. "There's been trouble." Aiden said nothing. "Looking for a girl. Dangerous, they say. Stole something important. I don't see many people. Even fewer see you, I imagine," the soldier replied with a smirk. They inspected the house, sniffing for lies. One lingered near the hearth, another near the trapdoor. Aiden's heart didn't race. It pounded slowly like war drums. Eventually they left, not satisfied, not fooled, but empty-handed. When the sun dropped low, he opened the cellar again. She climbed out wordlessly, brushing dust from her dress. Her eyes met his. "You could have handed me over." "I didn't." "Why not?" "I don't know." She stared at him for a moment longer, then said, "Thank you." It was the first real thing she'd said. That night they ate in silence. But the silence had changed. It wasn't distance anymore. It was something shared. By the 3rd day, she swept the cottage when he fetched water, repaired a crack in the window frame, cooked a simple stew. He pretended not to notice, but each act dug under his skin like warmth he didn't remember needing. They still didn't speak of the soldiers, or her bruises, or her name. But sometimes, when their eyes met across the table, there was a flicker of something human, something binding. Still tension clung to every movement. She checked the windows thrice before sleeping, whispered again in the dark. Once she called out a name, "Theron!" with such anguish that Aiden almost woke her. He didn't. Instead, he sat by the fire, staring into the flames, torn between 2 instincts. His lifelong vow to never again be part of someone else's war, and the unfamiliar pull to protect her from one. The 5th night brought heavy rain. the kind that soaked through the roof and drummed against the earth like fists. She stood by the window, arms crossed. "They won't stop looking for me," she said, her voice quiet. He didn't reply. "If they find me, they'll kill you too." Her voice was steady, but in that one sentence she handed him a choice that could either damn them both or bind them forever. She reveals her truth, and it changes everything. Rain pounded the roof through the night. Neither Eden nor the woman, who still hadn't offered her name, found sleep. The crackling fire between them barely masked the weight of her warning. If they found her, they'd kill him too. By morning the storm had passed, but not the unease. Iden sat at the edge of the hearth, sharpening a blade with deliberate calm, while she stood near the door, silhouetted in dawnlight, staring into the trees as if measuring the distance between danger and time. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. He didn't respond. Her hands were clasped in front of her, as though the words she was about to speak might shatter something sacred. "My name is Lysandra." That meant nothing to him until she added, "Queen Lysandra of Velmora, the rightful heir, dethroned by my uncle during a midnight coup." Iden dropped the blade. The silence was thunderous. She kept her gaze on the forest, her voice calm, but beneath it there was exhaustion. Regret. Fire. They murdered my brother. Poisoned my mother. I was next. I escaped with a blade to the ribs and barely enough breath to crawl into the woods. If you hadn't found me, I would have died in that field. Iden stood slowly, not from fear, but the weight of what she had just said rewrote everything he thought he knew about the world. About her. About himself. "You're a queen?" he finally managed. "I was," she replied bitterly. "Now I'm just a fugitive with nothing but scars and a broken kingdom behind me." He looked at her. Really looked at her. The way she always positioned her back to the door. The way she never flinched at the sound of steel. The nobility in her posture, even when drenched in mud and grief. It all made sense now. "I thought you were someone important," he murmured. She turned to face him finally. "Important doesn't matter anymore, not when the people you love betray you." He said nothing because he knew that feeling all too well. She took a deep breath and walked toward the table. "You deserve the truth. You didn't ask for this. I brought danger to your door." Eden shook his head. "I kept you here. That was my choice." She studied him. "Then you're a fool." "Probably." She almost smiled. A long silence followed. "Why tell me now?" he asked. "Aduktadim." "Because I can't keep running without trust. And because they're getting closer. If they find me and you still don't know who I am, it'll cost you more than you're ready to pay." He nodded once and turned back to the fire. "Then I won't let them find you." That night she told him everything. Through flickering firelight and clenched hands, she painted the portrait of her fall. The velvet halls of Castle Arden, the laughter of a younger brother who would never grow old, the way her mother smelled of rosemary and parchment. Then, silence, the kind that comes before. Treachery. It started with whispers, distant cousins, ambitious advisors. My uncle Rhaegar, he'd always hated the crown belonged to my side of the bloodline. She spoke of the banquet where her brother collapsed, foam at his lips, of her mother's sudden fever, of servants going missing, of doors that wouldn't open, of loyal knights suddenly turning their backs. "They waited until nightfall," she said. "I heard the screams before I saw the blood. I fled through the servant tunnels, bleeding barefoot. Not even sure where I was headed. I just knew I couldn't die there, not like them." Her voice broke then for the first time. Aiden sat still, not out of politeness but reverence, for her story, for the weight of it, for the fact that she'd carried it alone until now. She turned to him. "I don't expect you to fight for me. I only need to survive." He met her eyes. "You survived for a reason. Don't waste it." The next morning, Aiden found himself seeing the land differently. The hills weren't just empty anymore, they were cover. The creeks were escape routes. The barn wasn't just for tools. It was a hiding place. He hid her royal necklace, the only proof of her identity, in a sack beneath a loose plank in the barn wall. It was foolish to keep it, but he couldn't throw it away. Not yet. She worked beside him now, helping mend the fence, tending to the herbs, even learning how to split firewood. She refused to be idle, but the shadow never left them. One afternoon, a raven circled overhead. 2 days later, fresh boot prints appeared by the stream. Aiden said nothing to Lysandra, but she felt it too. Her posture changed. Her eyes stayed sharp. Then one evening he returned to the barn to fetch tools and froze. A pouch of hay had been overturned, a plank, slightly ajar, and on the floor, the silver edge of a broken chain, her necklace. The Queen's pursuers had found a clue, and now they knew exactly where to look. Loyalty now comes with a price. The days that followed were quiet, but not peaceful. There was an edge in the air, a pressure that hadn't been there before. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of wind through the trees carried a question. How long until someone knocked again? Aiden didn't tell Lysandra about the necklace. He buried it deeper beneath loose stones behind the barn. If they were being watched, it was already too late. But if not, maybe they still had time. Lysandra's behavior shifted. She spoke less. She worked harder. Her movements became sharper, more practiced. She knew the soldiers were close. She didn't say it, but he saw it in the way her hand always hovered near her belt, as if muscle memory still expected a sword. Then they came. No warning, no sound, just a hard knock at the door, 3 of them this time. Same black cloaks, same empty smiles. Aiden opened the door with a stillness he didn't feel. "Farmer," one greeted him. "I'm back again. Mind if we come in?" He stepped aside. "I've nothing to hide." They moved like they owned the ground. One of them ran a gloved finger along the table. Another glanced at the cellar trap door. The third stared too long at the ashes in the fireplace. "You sure no one's passed through here?" the lead asked. Aiden shook his head. "Not unless ghosts leave footprints." They chuckled, but their eyes never laughed. "You strike me as a man who likes solitude," another said. "No visitors, no stories. I like silence." "Then why do your stores look like they're feeding too?" The question hung in the air. Aiden didn't blink. "I've been eating more." A lie, and they knew it. The next few hours dragged like knives against bone. They searched everything, his barn, his woodshed, even the creek bed behind the cottage. He kept calm even when one soldier knocked the stew pot off the hearth and pretended it was an accident. But they found nothing. Because Lysandra was in the root cellar behind the barn, a place even Aiden hadn't touched in months. They left with warnings. "Keep your doors locked, farmer. Dangerous people in these parts." When they disappeared into the mist, Aiden exhaled for the first time in hours. He waited until dusk before fetching her. She emerged, covered in dust, eyes wild. "They searched the barn?" He nodded. "Did they?" "No." Her shoulders sagged, but not in relief, in calculation. The clock was ticking faster now. That night they didn't talk. But something shifted. The silence wasn't born of fear. It was forged in shared resolve. She sat closer to him by the fire. When their hands brushed, neither moved away. They didn't speak of the soldiers, or of what might come next. Instead, in the quiet, they started to live. Lysandra began to help with the fields. She took to the tasks like someone who had never touched earth before but learned fast. She burned her hands on the oven door, laughed when she spilled milk, swore like a soldier when she dropped a bucket of potatoes. Aiden found himself watching her more, not just to protect, but to memorize. The curve of her smile, the way she tied her sleeves, how she hummed songs from a kingdom that no longer existed. She spoke of her mother once, just once. "She used to brush my hair before every council session. Said presentation mattered more than wisdom. I hated it." He chuckled. "You don't strike me as someone who likes being told what to do." "I don't. That's why I'm alive." It wasn't flirtation. It was survival laced with tenderness. By the 10th day, they were no longer strangers. One evening, she made bread from scratch. Her first time. It came out dense, uneven but warm. He broke it in half, handed her a piece. I never thought I'd be sharing a meal with a queen. I never thought I'd be hiding in a farmer's cottage. They both smiled. The wind outside shifted, but inside it was calm. Aiden slept better that night. The kind of sleep earned after long days and laughter shared in candlelight. He dreamed of fields without fear, of mornings where he woke to the sound of her voice instead of hoofbeats. But when dawn crept in, something was wrong. The cottage was too quiet, too still. He reached for the space beside the fire, empty. He stood quickly. The door was ajar, and on the floor, footprints, bloody, leading away into the morning mist. Aiden wakes to find Lysandra missing, and blood marking the path to a danger he may never reach in time. Survival demands sacrifice, and a dark promise. The blood trail vanished near the edge of the woods. Panic clawed at Aiden's chest as he sprinted through the fog, calling her name into the damp air. Lysandra! No answer. Branches tore at his arms, his boots sank in mud. But he kept running. Every second was a memory of her, the warmth in her laugh, the shadows in her eyes, the way her hand lingered when it brushed against his. All of it now at risk of being lost. He found her collapsed beneath a fallen log, clutching her side, face pale and smeared with dirt. Her eyes fluttered open. You followed me. You left me no choice. She tried to rise, but pain folded her back down. Aiden knelt beside her, peeling back her torn cloak to reveal a deep gash across her ribs. Fresh, ugly, and angry. Ambush? He asked. She nodded. I circled back to throw them off. I thought I lost them. He said nothing. Just tore his sleeve, pressed it against the wound, and lifted her gently into his arms. Back at the cottage, he laid her down beside the fire. The blood soaked through the cloth, but the bleeding slowed. She didn't complain, only gritted her teeth and bore the pain like someone used to surviving it. You're reckless, he said, not angrily but softly, like someone who was terrified. I had to know if they were still watching the village. They are. They always will be. Her breath came in short gasps. Then we need to move soon. But Aiden didn't reply. He was busy stitching her wound with shaking hands. Her skin was hot with fever, and every wince from her stabbed deeper into him. You care too much, she whispered. Maybe. I didn't think you would. He paused. Neither did I. She looked up at him, her eyes glassy with exhaustion but still defiant. If you stay with me, you'll die with me. I left my life behind a long time ago. If I'm going to die, at least it will mean something. She shook her head. Don't make this about honor. It's not. It's about you. A silence followed that wasn't silence at all. It was the storm between two people standing at the edge of something irreversible. I'm not leaving you, he said finally. She closed her eyes. A single tear escaped down her cheek. Then swear it. Aiden leaned closer. No matter what happens, she said, her voice fragile. We survive together. Or not at all. He didn't hesitate. I swear it. He pressed his palm to hers. Blood from her wound stained both their skin, a bond forged not by love, not yet, but by necessity, trust, and something darker. Shared fate. The days blurred. Aiden cared for her through fever and nightmares. He cleaned the wound, changed the dressings, kept the fire alive. And in those moments of fragility, Lysandra let down her walls. She told him about her brother's death, about her mother's last words, about the years of court politics that prepared her for war but never for betrayal. Aiden in turn told her about the battle at Black Hollow, about the banner he once fought under, about the moment he laid down his sword because the blood wasn't worth the orders anymore. You were a soldier? She asked one night. I was more than that. I was sworn to the crown. She stared at him. Which crown? Yours. She didn't speak for a long time. You abandoned us? I walked away when the court rotted, when your uncle began pulling strings behind the throne, when I realized the war wasn't about protecting people anymore, it was about power. Why come back now? He looked at her. Because this time I'm not fighting for a crown. I'm fighting for you. Lysandra healed slowly. But every step she took came with renewed purpose. They began to train in the mornings. Quiet drills behind the barn. Aiden tested her balance. She corrected his footwork. Old instincts returned like ghosts finding their way home. But the danger grew closer. The forest grew less silent. One morning, while gathering herbs, Aiden spotted footprints near the creek. Not villagers, not hunters, spies watching. He didn't tell Lysandra. Not yet. But he sharpened every blade in the house. It happened in a blink. They were walking near the ridge, talking softly, when movement flashed in the trees. A figure, watching, then running. Aiden took off after him without a word. He chased the man through the underbrush, through thorns and roots, but he was fast, trained, the kind that disappears when you blink. By the time Aiden returned, breathless and scraped, Lysandra already knew. "They saw us together," she said. He nodded. Her jaw tightened. "Then they know I'm alive." A spy escapes into the forest, carrying the truth that Queen Lysandra lives and exactly where she hides. A spy escapes carrying the secret of Queen Lysandra's survival. Their quiet refuge burns under the weight of truth, and the past refuses to stay buried. The fire started with smoke, thin and bitter, curling through the cracks in the cottage roof just before dawn. Aiden woke first, coughing, lungs clawing at the thickening air. It took him a moment to realize what was happening. The scent wasn't from the hearth. It was sharper, wilder. He jumped to his feet, heart thundering. "Lysandra!" She was already on her knees, trying to gather what little she could. Her satchel, the hidden dagger, the boots left near the fire. The window behind her pulsed orange, and when Aiden tore open the door, flames leapt from the barn roof like vengeful tongues. "No time," he said. She didn't argue. She followed him out barefoot, ducking low as embers rained across the yard. The entire field was glowing. His tools, his harvest, his home, consumed. They ran. Behind them, the inferno roared like a beast unchained. They didn't stop until the sun was high, their lungs raw and feet bleeding. The forest swallowed them whole, the thick trees cloaking them in shadows and smoke. Lysandra collapsed near a creek, her hands shaking. Aiden knelt beside her, chest heaving, eyes locked on the horizon behind them. There was nothing left to see now, just rising black smoke against the sky. "It's gone," he said, more to himself than her. She didn't respond. "I built that with my hands, every plank, every stone, still silence, and then, softly, 'I'm sorry.'" He looked at her, eyes rimmed red, not from smoke, but from the grief he refused to show. "This is the cost," she whispered, "of helping me. It wasn't just you. They burned it because I mattered to you." Her eyes widened. She hadn't expected that answer. Aiden sat beside her, elbows on knees, staring into the creek. "I thought I'd buried everything that mattered a long time ago. Turns out I just locked it away." They wandered for days, never resting in the same place twice. The world had become a series of hiding spots. Caves, hollow trees, shadows. Their bond grew quieter, stronger. They stopped saying thank you or sorry. They didn't need to. Their silences had become fluent. But one night, under a canopy of stars and wind, Aiden finally spoke. "You asked why I left the crown." Lysandra turned her head slightly. "I was a commander in the north, Royal Guard, trusted, decorated, until they told me to put down a rebellion I knew was right." She said nothing. They were farmers, miners, people tired of taxes that left them starving. I refused the order, said I wouldn't kill innocents. What happened? I was dishonorably discharged, stripped of title, banished. He chuckled bitterly. They let me live, though. Said I was too loyal to be a threat. Lysandra reached out, fingers brushing his. You were too human to be a weapon. He looked at her. And you're too royal to be a ghost. Rain returned the next day. Cold, constant. The kind that numbs the skin and erodes the will. They took shelter beneath a rock ledge. Aiden started a small fire, barely enough to warm their hands. Lysandra wrapped herself in his cloak. She looked thinner, tired but alive. "You should leave me," she said. "Start over again." He didn't even look up. "We made a blood oath. I made you a fugitive. I was a ghost before you. Now I'm something else." She closed her eyes. That night, for the first time, they slept side by side, not for warmth, for trust. They crossed into the highlands by the seventh day. Fewer patrols, wilder terrain. But it wasn't empty. Iden noticed it first, movement at the ridge, glints of metal, whispers in the leaves. He stopped, raised a hand. Lysandra froze. From the shadows, figures emerged, slowly, silently. Not soldiers, not hunters, but men and women cloaked in tattered robes. Some wore remnants of royal colors, faded sashes, rusted insignias. One woman knelt. "Your Majesty." Lysandra stiffened. Her hand reached for her dagger, but Iden gently touched her wrist. They weren't enemies. They were waiting. From the shadows, a hidden group reveals themselves. Former royal loyalists who never stopped believing she'd return. A hidden group reveals themselves. Former royal loyalists who have been waiting for their queen. Hope flickers where power once reigned. But shadows of envy and betrayal threaten to snuff it out. The loyalists led Iden and Lysandra through winding trails that seemed carved by secrecy itself. The forest thinned into stone caverns, their mouths veiled by vines. Torches flickered deep within, casting orange halos against damp walls. For the first time in years, Lysandra stood in the presence of those who had once bowed to her bloodline. An older man stepped forward, his beard streaked silver, his armor dented but polished. He knelt, pressing a fist to his chest. "Your Majesty." We never stopped believing one by one. Others followed, farmers, hunters, smiths, and soldiers, all kneeling in reverence. Their clothing was patched, their weapons rusted, but their eyes burned with devotion. Lysandra swallowed hard. "Rise," she commanded softly. Her voice was unsteady, not from weakness, but from the crushing weight of their loyalty. She glanced at Iden. He stood back, silent, his hand never leaving the hilt of his knife. He didn't belong here, and he knew it. Inside the cavern, the loyalists unveiled their sanctuary. Maps carved into stone walls, ledgers of supply counts written in fading ink. A table ringed with candles where strategy had been whispered for years. Hope had not died. It had been waiting, growing brittle with age, desperate for a spark. "We believed the crown dead," the silver-bearded man said. "When word reached us of your escape, we prayed it was true. And here you are." Lysandra looked at them, her expression torn between gratitude and fear. "You think I can reclaim the throne, but I barely escaped alive. My family lies in graves dug by betrayal." A woman in a green sash stepped forward. "Your people still suffer. Taxes bleed them dry. Rhaegar's soldiers burn villages for disobedience. You are their hope." Her voice cracked on the last word, as though hope itself had teeth. Iden shifted uncomfortably. Hope was dangerous. It blinded men. It broke them. That night they feasted, or tried to. The loyalists had saved dried meats, root vegetables, and wine long past its prime. Yet they celebrated as though it were a royal banquet. Songs rose in the cavern halls. Old banners were unfurled. For a moment, Lysandra looked like a queen again, head held high, firelight gilding her face. But Iden noticed the stares. Not all were kind. Some glanced at him with suspicion, whispering when they thought he could not hear. He was a deserter. Why is he here? He's not one of us. Their words dug deep, reopening wounds he thought scarred over long ago. Later, when most had retired, Lysandra approached him. "They'll come to trust you." He shook his head. "They won't. To them, I'll always be the farmer who turned his back on the crown, and maybe they're right. You saved me. Not enough reason for them to let me stand in their circle." She touched his arm. "It's enough for me." The following days were filled with planning. Maps spread across tables, routes traced with daggers, names whispered, sympathizers in villages, merchants smuggling supplies, hidden caches of weapons buried in fields. The Loyalists believed the throne could be reclaimed. Lysandra, however, hesitated. Rebellion will cost lives. More villages burned, more innocents slaughtered. Am I willing to be the cause of more graves? You're their only chance, said the silver-bearded man. Without you, there is no future. Only Rhaegar's tyranny, but hesitation lingered in her eyes. Her heart carried scars deeper than any blade. Aiden's role became that of a shadow, present but unwelcomed. When he spoke, voices talked over him. When he offered caution, they called it cowardice. One advisor in particular, Sir Caldus, a hawk-eyed man with ambitions sharper than his sword, took every chance to undermine him. You trust a man who abandoned his oath? Caldus sneered in one council meeting. How do we know he won't abandon you again? Lysandra's jaw tightened. He has done more for me than anyone else in this cavern. Caldus bowed stiffly, but his eyes burned. Seeds of mistrust had already been planted. Despite tension, Aiden stayed close to Lysandra. They trained together at dawn, walked the cavern halls at dusk. He saw the weight pressing on her shoulders, the burden of lives depending on her. And in rare, quiet moments when the torches dimmed and the noise faded, she leaned on him, not as queen and subject, but as two souls haunted by the past. Yet danger was not done with them. It happened during a strategy meeting. The council gathered around the stone table, debating routes into the capital. Voices clashed, torches smoked. Lysandra stood, raising her hand to silence the arguments. Enough, she said. We cannot march blindly. We need proof of strength before we strike. Otherwise, we die as martyrs, not victors. She reached for the goblet of wine beside her. Aiden saw it first, too late, a shimmer at the rim. A scent, faint but wrong. She drank. Moments later, her hand trembled. The goblet clattered to the stone floor. Her eyes rolled back and she collapsed against the table. Chaos erupted. Shouts filled the chamber. Soldiers drew blades. Caldus shouted orders, his face unreadable. Aiden caught her before she struck the ground, her body already seizing, lips turning pale. Poison! Someone screamed. In the heart of her loyalists' sanctuary, Lysandra falls, poisoned mid-council, while suspicion and fear explode around her. Lysandra collapses in front of her council, poisoned during a strategy meeting. As her life hangs by a thread, love becomes the only cure, and someone wants it to be too late. Lysandra's body convulsed in Aiden's arms, her breath shallow, her skin ice. Around them, the stone chamber erupted in chaos. Council members shouted orders, loyalists pushed forward, but no one knew what to do. Poison had found its mark, and the queen was dying. Get a healer, Aiden roared. She won't make it, someone muttered. Not with that dose. Then Caldus stepped forward. There's only one antidote, he said grimly. The bloodroot bloom. Grows near the cliffs of Orin's Pass. 3 days' journey if you survive the road. 3 days. Lysandra wouldn't survive 3 hours. I'll go, Aiden said instantly. Caldus narrowed his eyes. Alone? How convenient. She doesn't have time for your politics. Aiden didn't wait. He laid Lysandra down gently, brushed a hand across her fevered brow, and turned. He didn't say goodbye. The road to Orin's Pass was a graveyard of travelers. Slopes steep enough to break bones. Shadows where bandits carved their kingdom. And yet Aiden moved through it like a man possessed. He fought off 2 thieves before midday. 1 blade to the leg, 1 cracked rib. Blood soaked his tunic, but he didn't stop. Every second wasted was another heartbeat stolen from her. At night he slept with a dagger in his fist, dreaming of her voice calling out through fog. In the morning he followed old paths carved by miners long gone. When he reached the cliffs, the wind screamed like a beast. Rain poured in sheets, but there it was, nestled in the rocks like a secret from the gods. The bloodroot bloom, crimson petals, vicious thorns. He scaled the cliff barehanded, every cut on his palms burned. Twice he slipped, nearly falling to his death. But when he reached the bloom, he didn't hesitate. He tore it free, wrapped it in cloth, and began the return journey, limping, bleeding, but alive. 2 nights later, he stumbled into the cavern, soaked, bruised, half-conscious. "They're back!" someone cried. "Clear the table!" He collapsed at Lysandra's side, placing the flower in the healer's hands. "Boil it. Use the stem, not the roots. They'll kill her." "How do you—" "Just do it." The healer obeyed. Hours passed in silence. Aiden didn't leave her side. He sat in the dark, watching her breathe, waiting for it to stop. It didn't. By morning, her fever broke. Her lips regained color. Her fingers twitched. When her eyes opened, they found his first. "You came back," she whispered. "Always." A tear slid down her cheek. "You saved me again." "No." "You held on. I just met you halfway." The camp rejoiced. Cheers echoed through the cavern. For the first time in weeks, hope lit more than torches. They had almost lost her, and now she lived, but not everyone celebrated. That night, whispers began. Who poisoned her? Why didn't they strike again? Why did Aiden know exactly what to find and where? Caldas stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed. She lives. But ask yourself, who brought the poison? Who left when she collapsed? Who returned just in time? No one answered, but seeds don't need sound to grow. The next morning, Aiden awoke to steel. Soldiers dragged him from his cot, bound his hands, and hauled him into the council chamber. "What is this?" he demanded. "Justice," Caldas replied. "You're accusing me? You were alone with the queen. You vanished after she fell. You returned with a rare cure no one else could find." "I bled for her," Aiden roared. "I nearly died." "A perfect story," Caldas sneered. "One only you can prove." Aiden turned to the others, but their faces were shadows. Suspicion darkened every glance. Only Lysandra remained silent, seated on a makeshift throne, pale, watching. He met her eyes. "Tell them," he said. "Tell them I'd never hurt you." She looked away. The silence shattered him. Framed and betrayed, Aiden is arrested under suspicion of poisoning the queen. The same life he risked everything to save. Aiden is framed for poisoning the very woman he nearly died to save. And Lysandra says nothing. Truth is fragile where power is in play, and hearts are easier to shatter than kingdoms. Chains cut deeper than steel. Aiden sat in the center of the Loyalists' council chamber, wrists bound in iron, head held high, but rage simmering beneath his stillness. Around him stood men and women he had defended, advised, even bled for, and now they stared at him like a stranger, like a threat. Caldas paced before the makeshift tribunal, his voice sharp as a blade. "We ask only for truth. We ask only for protection of our queen. She lives because of me," Aiden growled. "Or perhaps she lives because the poisoner botched the dose." Gasps rose from the crowd. Aiden's jaw clenched. "You have no proof," he said. "But we have history," Caldas said coldly. He pulled a parchment from his cloak. "Aiden Corrin, former royal guard, discharged for insubordination. Rumored to have consorted with rebel factions. Disappeared for a decade. Reemerges conveniently close to a queen in exile." Aiden's mouth tightened. The past always found its way back. In a chamber not far away, Lysandra sat upright for the first time in days. Her color had returned, her strength slowly regaining. But her spirit felt bruised. She had watched the trial in silence, weak, disoriented. But one moment stuck in her mind. The way Aiden looked at her. He hadn't begged, hadn't flinched. He had only asked her to speak, and she hadn't. Now alone in her chambers, she stared at the wine goblet still stained with the dried trace of poison. Someone had tried to kill her, and it wasn't him. She rose, unsteady but determined. The trial continued without pause. Caldas called witness after witness. Old grudges, half-truths. One soldier even claimed Aiden once stole rations during a northern skirmish, an act disproven years ago but convenient now. Finally, Lysandra entered the chamber. All rose, Sit, she commanded, voice hoarse but resolute. She walked toward Aiden, who looked up, still silent but hope flickering in his eyes. I've known betrayal, she said to the room. I watched my own family murdered, poisoned, slaughtered. I know what it feels like to be hunted by someone you trusted. She turned toward Caldus. And I also know what it feels like to be protected, rescued, saved. Caldus stiffened. Lysandra pointed at Aiden. He has done more to keep me alive than anyone in this cavern, including you, your majesty, emotions. Silence. Her voice cracked like thunder. I drank that wine because I trusted my counsel. Someone in this chamber betrayed me, but it wasn't him. The silence was unbearable. Then a voice, soft, female. There was movement near the wine stores the night before. Heads turned. A shadow, broad shoulders, a limp eyes turned to Caldus. His face froze. You dare accuse me? I don't need to, Lysandra said. But I know my uncle's allies. I remember who served him before the coup. You were one of them, Caldus drew his blade. But Aiden was faster, even with shackled hands. He lunged, slammed into Caldus with his shoulder, sending the blade skittering across the stone. A scuffle broke out, loyalists scrambling. By the time order returned, Caldus was gone, escaped through a rear passage. Chaos ignited. The camp split. Some demanded pursuit. Others questioned how long the traitor had been among them. Trust, once fragile, now fractured. Lysandra stood over Eden, her voice trembling. I should have spoken sooner. You did now. She placed a hand on his shoulder. I won't doubt you again. Their eyes locked, not as queen and soldier, but as two people finally seeing each other clearly. In the shadows beyond the highlands, Caldus rides hard, heading straight toward the usurper king, carrying with him the truth. Lysandra lives, and the loyalists are rising. Caldus escapes and rides toward the usurper king, with the truth about Lysandra's survival. Reclaiming a kingdom begins with a single vow, but even hope must bleed before it can rise. The council chamber was no longer filled with whispers and doubt. It rang now with resolve. Maps spread across the stone table were marked with blood-red roots, resistance pockets and lines of risk that made even the bravest flinch. Lysandra stood at the center, her chin high, voice iron. We march on Arden in 7 days. The people are ready, they need only the flame. We will be it, she turned to Aiden. And you? He met her eyes. I swore I'd die beside you. But now I want to live beside you. Let's win this. The room stilled, then nods, then hands on swords, then loyalty, not commanded but chosen. The week blurred into a storm of preparation. Soldiers drilled in the clearing. Farmers learned to hold blades. Young messengers darted between camps. The old forged arrows beside the young. The forgotten kingdom stirred. And in that motion, Aiden and Lysandra found moments only they could understand. They trained side by side at dawn. He tested her blade grip. She corrected his posture. They laughed, they fought, they remembered. One night she touched the scar on his shoulder. How did you get this? First campaign. Protected a coward who fled. Would you do it again? If it meant getting here, yes. She didn't speak. She only leaned forward, her forehead resting against his. As days passed, rumors began to spread beyond the hills. In the border towns, walls whispered her name. In the taverns, songs returned. Songs once banned. People began to resist, quietly at first, refusing taxes, harboring soldiers, burning the usurper's banners. The fire was spreading. Lysandra watched it all unfold with a heart heavy but steady. She knew what must come. Aiden found her by the river the night before the final march. You're thinking too loudly, he said. She smiled faintly. I'm trying to remember who I was before the crown, before the war, and she was softer, but softer didn't survive. He took her hand. You're not alone anymore. You never have to be again. The next morning they assembled, 300 strong, scarred, battered, but burning with purpose. Lysandra addressed them not as royalty but as one of them. We've been forgotten, hunted, broken, but we are still here. We carry the names of those lost. We march not for thrones but for voices that were silenced, for mothers who died in smoke, for children who never saw spring, for justice, for memory. For tomorrow her voice cracked, not from weakness but from carrying too much. And if I fall, know that it will not be in vain. Know that you fought with honor, and that I was proud to march beside you. Iden stepped beside her, sword drawn. "For Velmora!" he roared. The army echoed him. "For Velmora!" They moved at twilight, using fog and forest as cover. Iden rode with the scouts. Lysandra stayed at the center, surrounded but never shielded. They moved like ghosts, hearts loud in their chests, footsteps light on the soil they were born to reclaim. But the night betrayed them. Hours before they reached the final camp, Lysandra disappeared. Her guards found only broken branches, a slashed satchel, and a small sigil carved into the bark. A falcon crest. Iden fell to his knees. "She's gone," one whispered. "No," he growled. "She was taken," his fists clenched. "And I will burn the capital to the ground if I must." On the eve of war, as hope burns bright, Lysandra vanishes, kidnapped by those who'd rather see her silenced than crowned. Lysandra is captured the night before the final battle, leaving Iden to decide whether to save her or lead without her. Her past returns in chains, but her spirit remains unbroken, even as the crown that betrayed her stares back. The cell reeked of mold and silence. Lysandra sat against cold stone, wrists bruised, lips split, but eyes unbroken. Across from her, beyond the iron bars, the man who once kissed her forehead as a child now wore a crown forged from betrayal. Rhaegar, her cousin, her usurper. He stepped closer, hands behind his back, robes trailing dust. "I should have killed you when I had the chance." She met his gaze. "You still don't know how." His smirk cracked into something crueler. "Defiance suits you. Pity it won't last. You'll beg before this ends." "I watched you poison my brother," she said. "You don't get to lecture me on weakness." He leaned down, voice low. "And yet here you are, chained, waiting to die in the castle your mother built. The throne never fit you, Lysandra. It never will." She spit blood at his boots. He turned away. "Enjoy your last night as a symbol. By tomorrow you'll be nothing but a whisper in the forests beyond the capital." Iden's fists were bloodied from breaking stone. "She's inside that castle," he said, breath heaving. "And we're storming it tonight." One of the captains hesitated. "We don't have the numbers. The gates are fortified." "I don't care if we go in with swords or teeth," Iden snapped. "We're getting her out." He turned to the map burned into his mind. Secret passages, sewers, forgotten tunnels used by servants long dead. He had once guarded these halls. Now he would tear them down. Inside the dungeon, Lysandra traced the scratches on the wall, marks left by others who had waited here, hoping someone would come. Her body ached. Her mind fought to stay sharp. But her spirit, it had never been clearer. She thought of Iden, his voice, his steadiness, the warmth in his eyes that turned war into calm. She closed her eyes. He was coming. She knew it. The storm came with them. Iden and the chosen few moved through the catacombs, weapons wrapped in cloth, hearts pulsing with wrath. Every step echoed with memory, every shadow was a ghost from his past. They breached the sewer grate just as thunder cracked the sky. Inside, alarms rang. But they moved fast. Steel met steel, guards fell, torches dropped. They left a trail of silence behind them. Rhaegar stood at his throne, robes stained with wine. "She will die tomorrow at dawn," he said to his court, publicly. A reminder of what treason costs. But even as he spoke, word reached him. Intruders. In the lower wing, his wine spilled. Lysandra heard the footsteps first, not guards, different, familiar, then the clash of swords, then his voice shouting her name. "Lysandra!" Her heart almost stopped. She rushed to the bars. "I done!" He appeared in the corridor, bloodied, sword in hand, eyes wild. "Hold on!" But before he reached her, a blade from the shadows, an assassin cloaked. Fast. Aiden turned too late. Steel met flesh. He dropped to his knees. Her scream cracked the stone. Aiden falls, wounded at her feet, even as the door swings open. Too late or just in time, only fate will decide. Aiden reaches Lysandra, but is struck down before he can save her. Victory tastes bitter when it costs everything, and love stands bleeding in its shadow. Aiden awoke to fire, not flames but pain. A blaze in his chest, white-hot, relentless. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. Only the sound of war filled his ears, boots on marble, steel against steel, cries of rage and grief. Somewhere above, Lysandra was fighting, and she was alone. In the royal throne room, Rhaegar stood at the base of the dais, blades slick with blood, robes torn. Guards lay in heaps around him, some loyal, others dead for nothing. Across from him, Lysandra rose. Her armor was cracked, her hair soaked with rain, her eyes burning. "This ends now," she said. He sneered. "You think you've won?" She raised her sword. "No. I think you lost the moment you betrayed blood," he charged. Their clash echoed across the hall like thunder. Years of resentment, fear, and vengeance poured into each strike. Lysandra moved with fury, but precision. Her blade wasn't wild, it remembered. He landed a blow across her side. She stumbled, but she rose. He laughed. "You're bleeding." "So are you." She fainted, spun, and drove her sword through his ribs. Rhaegar gasped, blood on his lips. "You're just like me." She held his gaze. "No. I bury monsters, I don't become them," and she let him fall. Silence blanketed the palace. The usurper was dead. But so were dozens of her men, her loyalists, her friends. The price of the throne had been steep, and it wasn't done taking. Aiden drifted between darkness and memory. He saw her face, the way she'd looked at him in the woods, the firelight on her skin, the tremble in her voice when she said his name. He woke to her tears. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered, clutching his blood-stained hand. "Not now. Not after everything," he rasped, barely audible. "You're safe." "I'm not," she said. "Not without you." His fingers twitched. Alive, but barely. Days passed. The castle was reclaimed, but joy never truly arrived. Funerals lined the courtyards. Banners were stitched back into place. The streets were quiet, as if waiting to see if this crown would heal or break like the last. Lysandra wore black on the day of her coronation. No celebration. Only silence. When she placed the crown on her own head, she didn't smile. She didn't look to the crowd. She looked to the wounded man on the balcony, held up by bandages and sheer will. He nodded once, and she bowed her head in return. That evening they met in the garden beneath the tree where her mother once read to her. "You did it," Eden said. "No," she replied, "we did." He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away, but the stillness was pierced by footsteps. A council member approached, head bowed. "Your Majesty, the court has convened for what?" "The matter of marriage. The kingdom needs legitimacy, stability. They suggest a noble union." Lysandra went cold. The counselor continued. "Aiden Corin is brave, but he has no bloodline. No claim Aiden stood. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. As the crown settles on her head, the court demands a royal match, forcing Lysandra to choose between the man who saved her soul and the kingdom that demands her sacrifice. Lysandra is crowned but must choose. Marry a noble for stability or fight for the love that nearly died for her. Love defies bloodlines, but can it defy the crown, or will tradition demand its final sacrifice? The throne room echoed with quiet argument. Advisors whispered behind tapestries. Councilmen scribbled alliances in margins. And Lysandra sat alone, the weight of gold pressing into her skull, heavier than any blade she'd ever faced. She must marry within noble blood, one said. An heir legitimizes the line, another insisted. She's queen, not lover. She rose slowly, the crown glinting under torchlight. I am not a vessel for tradition, she said. I am the throne now. But even as her voice echoed, her fingers trembled behind her back. Outside the walls, Aidan packed his things in silence. No one stopped him. No one noticed. The palace guards nodded respectfully, politely distant. Servants who once smiled now looked away. His place in the story, it seemed, was ending. He wrapped the last of his supplies in cloth, one of Lysandra's old tunics. Not by accident. He hadn't said goodbye. He wouldn't make it harder for her. She had a kingdom. He had memories. Lysandra stood on the balcony where they first kissed. The city stretched before her, freed, rebuilding. But in her chest a storm still raged. She turned as a familiar voice approached. Leaving without a word? Aidan stood at the edge of the garden, bag slung over his shoulder. I didn't think I needed one, he said. You don't get to vanish. I don't belong here. She walked toward him, heart loud. You belong with me. He looked away. Then say it. A pause. I love you. Silence again. Then her hand reached for his. But they want someone else. They want a puppet, not a partner. He stepped back. I won't be your shame, or your secret you never were. The royal court assembled the next morning. Nobles arrived in silks, banners flew, rumors spun like thread. Lysandra stepped onto the dais, eyes unwavering. Today, said the chancellor, Her Majesty shall announce her intended. The hall stilled. Lysandra inhaled. Her gaze scanned the crowd until it found him. No crown, no titles, just Aidan standing by the wall. I have fought wars. Buried blood carried kingdoms. She raised her voice. But I will not sacrifice love to appease fear. Gasps, whispers. I choose Aidan Corin not because of his birth, but because he stood when all others fled. The hall erupted. Some cheered, others shouted, advisors argued. Aidan stood frozen. She walked down the steps. I choose you, she whispered. He stepped forward. I choose you too. They kissed, there, in defiance of law. Even after choosing each other, can love and rulership coexist, or must one fall for the other to survive? What began with a loaf ends in legend, and a love too powerful for history to silence. Years passed. The throne no longer groaned under the weight of bloodshed. Velmora blossomed again, not into the empire it once was, but into something better. Just, humble, awake. And at its center sat a queen who wore no jewels unless gifted by children, and a man with no title except the one she whispered only to him. Beloved. Aidan never wore a crown. He never asked to. He ruled beside her with silence, with kindness, with bread fresh from his own hands. He was not the king, but he was the reason she remembered how to live. In the village square, children gathered around old stones carved with symbols. Every week a storyteller came, hooded, eyes twinkling, voice like warm wind. He told of a queen who walked through fire, of a farmer who shared bread with a stranger, of battles fought with steel and with silence, of a love that bent a kingdom but never broke it. Some said it was fiction, others swore it was gospel. The truth was always somewhere in between. Inside the palace, Lysandra walked the halls with bare feet. The war no longer followed her, only the scent of ink and lavender. Aidan tended to gardens the way he once tended to wounds, gently with hands built for protection, not possession. Their love had aged like wine left untouched too long, rich, dark, and unshakable. And still, when they sat by the hearth, he would break bread the same way he had that first night. Steam rising, silence falling. Remember this? He asked once, handing her the crust. She smiled. The moment you cursed yourself with me. No, he said, the moment I found home. They had children, not of blood but of spirit. Orphans, lost soldiers, wounded minds, all found safety within their walls. Lysandra taught them diplomacy. Aidan taught them how to grow tomatoes. Both taught them how to endure, They were not rulers in the way legends described, but they were exactly what their people needed. One winter's morning after the first snow, Lysandra asked to visit the field where she had first fallen. It hadn't changed much. Still wild, still quiet. She stood in the exact place where her body once gave out, where a man, long forgotten by the world, gave her bread instead of questions. Now she was whole, and so was he. They sat there for hours, not speaking, just remembering. In the square, the storyteller rapped his tale. And that, little ones, is how the queen survived, not by armies, but by the bread of a man who saw her not as a crown, but as a person. One child raised a hand. Is it true? The old man smiled. Truth is a seed. Plant it and it becomes whatever you choose to water. He stood, cloak sweeping behind him. But there's more to tell, of course. Gasps. More battles, more sorrow, and perhaps more love. He winked. But that, my dears, is for another time. There's more to tell, the storyteller says, turning into the wind. And somewhere in the shadows, another story begins. There's more to tell, the storyteller says, hinting that every end is the seed of another beginning. Have you ever known a story like Aiden and Lysandra's, where love stood against a kingdom? If this tale touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and be the first to witness the next legend unfold. We don't just tell stories here, we keep them alive. Until next time, remember, every legend begins with something as simple as shared bread,